The security guard's hand slammed down on the desk hard enough to rattle the coffee cup. "This account is frozen. Step back, now." The man on the other side of the glass didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply stared at the monitor, eyes wide as the words denial and review flashed red across the screen. Somewhere behind him, a woman gasped. A wheelchair squeaked. The air smelled like disinfectant and fear. No one noticed the woman standing 10 feet away, half hidden behind a column, holding a thin manila folder against her chest, like a shield. Her name was Hannah Brooks. 31. Payroll analyst, invisible by design. She felt the vibration of the room before anyone spoke again. The low hum of fluorescent lights. The distant beep of a cardiac monitor, the guard's breath fast and shallow. Hannah's fingers tightened around the folder. Her knuckles went white. Inside were numbers she had memorized without meaning to. Numbers that should never exist. 2 hours earlier, the hospital had been quiet, in the way only American institutions get after midnight. Polished floors, empty corridors, the illusion of order. Hannah sat alone in the finance annex, a windowless room tucked behind medical records, where the clocks ticked too loud and the coffee always tasted burnt. She worked nights, because nights didn't ask questions. On her screen was a payroll reconciliation report, flagged automatically by the system. A routine thing, usually meaningless. But one line had stopped her cold. Overtime compensation routed through an external vendor account. Not unusual, except the amount. Not inflated, not padded, duplicated. Over and over, small enough to hide, consistent enough to feel intentional. Hannah leaned closer to the screen, the light reflected off her glasses, hiding her eyes. Her breath slowed. She pulled the report apart, line by line, tracing the flow the way she used to trace rivers on maps as a kid. The money didn't vanish. It moved, quietly, cleanly, into an account tied to a contractor that technically didn't exist anymore. Behind her, a chair scraped. "You're still here." She flinched and turned. Marcus Doyle stood in the doorway. Security badge clipped to his belt posture, loose, but eyes sharp. Early 40s, former military. He scanned rooms the way other people scanned faces. "Just finishing," Hannah said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Marcus stepped closer, glanced at her screen, then looked away. "Careful with late nights," he said. "Not unkind. Not friendly either. People assume things when they see patterns." Hannah nodded. He lingered a second too long, then left. The door clicked shut. The room felt smaller. She stared back at the numbers. Somewhere deep in the building, someone was being told they didn't belong, that something they depended on had been cut off without warning. Hannah didn't know his name yet. She didn't know why the system had chosen tonight, but she knew one thing with terrifying clarity. These numbers were not a mistake. By the time dawn bled through the narrow basement windows, Hannah's screen was filled with columns that refused to line up. She hadn't moved in over an hour. Her coffee sat untouched, a thin skin forming on top. The building was waking up now. Doors thudded, voices echoed, shoes squeaked against polished floors. She printed the report anyway. The machine groaned slow and deliberate, each page sliding out like an accusation. Hannah stacked them, neatly tapped the edges until they aligned, then slid them into the folder. Her hands were steady. Her stomach was not. At 8 sharp, the finance floor filled with sound. Laughter that stopped when supervisors walked by, phones ringing, keyboards clacking like rain. Hannah took her seat at the long shared desk, shoulders slightly rounded, eyes down. She had perfected this posture over years, non-threatening, forgettable, mourning someone said too loudly. Hannah looked up. Rachel Kim stood there, arms crossed, badge swinging. Senior compliance officer, late 30s, always immaculate, always watching. "You look tired," Rachel said, studying Hannah's face instead of her screen. "Late shift," Hannah replied. Rachel nodded, then glanced at the folder. "What's that reconciliation?" Hannah said. "One word, neutral." Rachel's mouth twitched. "Funny. Compliance didn't flag anything last night." Hannah felt the smallest shift inside her chest. "Payroll system did." Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice. "Those alerts get noisy after upgrades. False positives." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Best not to chase ghosts. Before Hannah could respond, a man staggered past the desk, arguing into his phone. His voice cracked. "They said my hours don't exist. I was here. I was here." He stopped, pressed his palm to the desk to steady himself, then kept walking. No one followed him. Hannah watched his back disappear into the stairwell. Rachel straightened. "Well, circle back," she said, already turning away. The rest of the morning blurred. Hannah processed invoices, answered emails, nodded when spoken to. But every sound felt amplified. Every glance lingered a beat too long. At 11, her phone buzzed with an internal message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. No punctuation. No name." She stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then she deleted the message and slipped her phone into her pocket. At lunch, Hannah sat alone in the courtyard, concrete benches still cool from the night. A maintenance crew worked nearby, orange vests bright against gray walls. One of them, an older man with oil-stained hands, caught her staring. "You see it too," he said quietly, nodding toward the building. "See what?" Hannah asked. "The way things move without anyone touching them," he said. "Money, people, decisions." She didn't answer. He smiled, gentle, and went back to work. By mid-afternoon, Hannah made her choice. She opened a secure drive, created a folder, and named it with a date and time spelled out in full. She copied the files. Then more. Every trace she could find. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows across the lobby, Hannah stood and walked toward the executive elevators for the first time in 3 years. Her reflection followed her in the glass, pale, focused, not invisible anymore. The executive elevator rejected her badge with a dull buzz that echoed louder than it should have. Hannah tried again. Same sound. She stepped back, pulse ticking in her throat, then noticed the small camera above the panel tilt, slightly adjusting, watching. "Looking for someone," a voice asked. She turned. Thomas Reed stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, suit jacket open like he hadn't decided whether to stay or leave. Early 40s, Chief Operations Officer, a man whose name appeared on memos, but whose face most people only saw on plaques. "I'm trying to get upstairs," Hannah said. Thomas glanced at the elevator, then at her badge. "Payroll doesn't usually ride this one." "I know," she said. The word came out before fear could stop it. He studied her for a moment, then swiped his own badge. The doors slid open. "You've got 30 seconds, he said, stepping inside. "That's how long before someone asks why I helped you." The elevator rose in silence. Hannah could hear her own breathing. The floor indicator climbed each number, lighting up like a warning. When the doors opened, the air changed. Quieter, thicker, carpet instead of tile. Thomas stopped just outside the doors. "Say what you came to say," he said, carefully. Hannah opened the folder. The paper smelled like toner and something metallic. Over the last 9 months, she began, then corrected herself. Over the last 9 months, spelled out payroll funds have been redirected through a shell contractor tied to our internal overtime approvals. The amounts are small per transfer but consistent. The total exceeds 7 figures. Thomas didn't react. His face stayed still, but his jaw tightened. Compliance reviewed this. They missed it, Hannah said, or they didn't want to see it. A door down the hall opened. Laughter spilled out, then cut off when it closed again. Thomas glanced toward the sound. You're making a serious accusation. I'm stating a pattern, Hannah said, and patterns don't lie unless someone teaches them to. He exhaled slowly. Who else knows security? Maybe she said, thinking of Marcus' eyes. Compliance is aware I looked. That's not good, Thomas said. No, Hannah agreed. He flipped through the pages faster now. Numbers, dates, names. His finger stopped on one line. This authorization code, he said. That belongs to the executive tier. Hannah nodded. That's why I came. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The building hummed around them, systems running smoothly, while something rotten hid in the wiring. Thomas closed the folder. You shouldn't have brought this to me, he said quietly. Hannah felt the floor drop away. Then who? He met her eyes. Something shifted there. Not fear, recognition. The person who signs off on my mistakes, he said. And everyone else's. Footsteps approached from the far end of the hall. Thomas stepped back toward the elevator. You don't exist to them yet, he said. Keep it that way. Tonight, 12:30 sharp spelled out. Server room B. If you're followed, walk away. The elevator doors closed between them. Hannah stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding, knowing she had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Server room B smelled like cold metal and recycled air. Hannah arrived 3 minutes early the way people do when they don't trust time to behave. The corridor lights flickered overhead, each buzz stretching her nerves tighter. She paused at the door, listening. Nothing. Just the steady whine of fans behind the wall, like a building breathing in its sleep. She slipped inside and closed the door softly. Rows of black racks towered around her cables, coiled like veins. Blue LEDs blinked in patient rhythms. Hannah set the folder on a steel table and exhaled long and slow, as if that might steady the room. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. No message, just a pulse. She didn't check it. Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried. Thomas Reed entered without looking surprised. He didn't speak right away. He scanned the corners, the ceiling, the small red light above the door. We've got 20 minutes, he said. After that, the system logs this room as occupied, and someone asks questions. Hannah nodded and opened the folder. I pulled the access trails, she said. Not just payroll, scheduling, vendor approvals. The same signature appears across departments. Thomas leaned over the table. His finger traced a line, then stopped. This account shouldn't be able to touch both sides, he said. It can, if it's mirrored, Hannah replied. The permissions were split months ago. Quietly. Who would know how to do that? Someone who designed the workflow, she said, or someone who inherited it and learned fast. Thomas straightened. His expression hardened. This isn't theft, he said. It's infrastructure capture. Yes, Hannah said, and it's ongoing. The door handle rattled. Both of them froze. The sound passed. A cart rolled by outside wheels, clacking, then faded. Hannah realized her hands were shaking. She curled them into fists and forced them still. Thomas lowered his voice. If this goes public the wrong way, people lose jobs. Benefits, trust. If it stays hidden, Hannah said people lose paychecks they already earned. Some already have. He looked at her, then really looked, not at the folder, at her face. Why you, he asked. Why risk this? Hannah swallowed. Because the system assumes I won't, she said, and because the man who collapsed in the lobby this morning worked double shifts for 6 weeks. That never existed on paper. Silence settled between the racks. The fans kept spinning indifferent. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim drive. "There's a shadow ledger," he said. "Isolated. I didn't know what it was for until now. If you can access it, we can prove intent. And if I can't, then you disappear back to payroll," he said. "And I deny this meeting ever happened." The words landed heavy. Hannah took the drive. It felt warm in her palm, like it had been carried too long. "Who else is involved?" she asked. Thomas hesitated. "The person you least expect," he said, "and the one everyone already trusts." The lights flickered again. Somewhere above them, an elevator chimed. Hannah slipped the drive into her pocket, knowing the next step would change everything, and that there was no longer a safe way back. Hannah accessed the shadow ledger from her apartment long after the city outside had gone quiet. The radiator clicked. A siren wailed somewhere far below, then faded. She sat at her small kitchen table. Laptop open curtains, half-drawn the glow of the screen, carving her face out of the dark. The drive unlocked without protest. No password, no encryption. Just a clean interface that felt almost polite. That was the first warning. She followed the entries, slowly letting her eyes adjust to the logic of it. This wasn't sloppy fraud. It was elegant. Funds routed through labor adjustments, recoded as compliance reserves, then washed through temporary services that never touched a human name. Every transaction approved by the same digital signature, a name she recognized. Rachel Kim. Hannah leaned back, breath caught halfway in. Compliance. The person who told her not to chase ghosts. The person everyone trusted to keep the hospital clean. The realization didn't come with shock. It came with weight, a pressure behind her eyes, the kind that made everything feel suddenly inevitable. She kept digging. Timestamps. Internal messages archived but never sent. A pattern of edits made minutes before audits permissions, toggled on and off like light switches. Rachel hadn't just hidden the theft. She had designed the silence around it. Hannah's phone buzzed. A call. Unknown number. She let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, you're working late again," Rachel said. Her voice was calm, familiar, too close. Hannah said nothing. "You should be careful," Rachel continued. "Some systems are sensitive. They don't like being opened without context." "I like context," Hannah said quietly. A pause. Hannah could picture Rachel's expression, shifting, the smile tightening. "If you keep going," Rachel said, "you won't like what you find." "I already don't," Hannah replied. Rachel exhaled, slow and controlled. "People rely on stability, not truth. Stability. You disrupt that, you become the problem." "People are missing pay," Hannah said. "That's not stability. That's collateral," Rachel said, and the word landed like a slap. "You think this place survives without compromises?" Hannah closed her eyes. When she opened them, her reflection stared back at her from the dark window, smaller than she felt, sharper. "I think," Hannah said, "that you're stealing from people who don't have the power to notice." Silence stretched. Then Rachel laughed once softly. "You always were smarter than you looked," she said. "But smart people still lose." The line went dead. Hannah sat there for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where certainty used to live. She copied the ledger files onto 3 separate drives, labeled each one by hand, and sealed them in envelopes. Then she stood, walked to the sink, and washed her hands as if they were dirty. When she returned, there was a new email on her screen. No sender name. Just a subject line, "Board meeting rescheduled, attendance mandatory." Hannah read it twice. Somewhere downtown, lights burned in offices that never slept. She shut the laptop, knowing the next move would no longer be hers alone. and that the person everyone trusted had just revealed how far she was willing to go to stay untouchable. The boardroom felt colder than the rest of the building, as if the glass walls were designed to keep warmth out, along with doubt. Hannah took the seat closest to the door, back straight hands, folded the 3 sealed envelopes tucked inside her bag like a second spine. Around the table, voices overlapped in practiced confidence, laughter, coffee cups clinked. No one looked at her long enough to remember she was there. Rachel Kim arrived last. She didn't rush. She never did. Her heels struck the floor with deliberate rhythm as she took her place near the center, setting her tablet down with a calm that felt rehearsed. When her eyes flicked toward Hannah, there was no surprise, just acknowledgement, as if this meeting had always been meant to include them both. The chair cleared his throat and began. Budget projections, staffing adjustments, a brief mention of payroll discrepancies framed as a temporary system error. Hannah felt the room lean away from the words, relieved to treat them as technical noise. Rachel spoke next. "Compliance has reviewed the matter," she said evenly. "There is no evidence of intentional misconduct. The affected accounts will be corrected retroactively." A murmur of approval moved around the table. Someone nodded. Someone smiled. Hannah felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment the system expected her to disappear. She stood. The sound of her chair scraping back cut through the room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Rachel turned fully now, eyebrows lifting just slightly. "I'd like to add context," Hannah said. Her voice didn't shake. It surprised her how solid it felt. The chair frowned. "And you are payroll analyst," Hannah said. "Night shift." A few heads tilted. Mild irritation. Rachel's lips pressed together. Hannah reached into her bag and placed 1 envelope on the table. Then another, then the third. The paper made a soft final sound as it landed. "These are copies," she said. "Time-stamped. External and internal." Rachel's voice cut in. "This is highly irregular. So is rerouting earned wages through a mirrored vendor account," Hannah replied. She turned, slightly letting her gaze travel the table, especially when the approval signature belongs to the person responsible for oversight. Silence dropped hard. Rachel rose slowly. "You're confused," she said. "You don't understand the structure." "I do," Hannah said. "I traced it." The chair looked between them. Ms. Kim Rachel inhaled, then smiled. "This is inappropriate. I recommend we recess and address this privately." The far screen lit up before anyone could respond. A new participant joined the call. No name, just a voice deep and controlled. "No," the voice said. "We won't." Every head turned. Hannah felt the air shift heavy with something final. The voice continued calm and precise. "Well, address it now, because the only thing more expensive than fraud is pretending it didn't happen." Rachel's face drained of color. Hannah didn't move. She stared at the screen, heart pounding, knowing the person behind that voice had been listening long before she ever entered the room. The screen sharpened, resolving into the face of a man few people in the room had ever seen in real time. Gray at the temples, eyes steady. No logo behind him, no title card. Just a quiet authority that pressed down on the table like weight. "My name is William Carter," he said, "Interim Chief Executive Officer." The room stiffened. Someone inhaled sharply. Rachel sat back down too slowly. William's gaze moved across the board, then stopped on Hannah. "Miss Brooks," he said, "thank you for not leaving." Hannah felt the words land in her chest. She hadn't realized how close she'd been to running. William turned back to the room. "For the last 6 months, I've been monitoring internal financial controls without disclosure. What Ms. Brooks presented aligns with what my external auditors flagged, but could not localize. Rachel's fingers curled around the edge of the table. "This is a misinterpretation," she said. "You're trusting a junior analyst over your compliance director." William didn't raise his voice. "I am trusting the data," he said, "and the fact that you altered audit permissions 14 times in 9 months, always within a 10-minute window before reviews." A board member shifted. "Rachel," he said quietly, "is that true?" Rachel's smile returned brittle. Those adjustments were procedural. William nodded once. "Then you won't mind explaining why the shadow ledger was created under your credentials and hidden from standard compliance access." The word shadow seemed to echo. Rachel stood again. "This is a witch hunt." William leaned forward. "No," he said. "This is a reckoning." He gestured off-screen. The door at the back of the boardroom opened. 2 security officers entered, posture formal, hands visible. Not aggressive, inevitable. Rachel laughed a sharp sound that broke and then collapsed. "You think removing me fixes anything," she said. "This place runs on silence. On people like her keeping their heads down." She pointed at Hannah, her hand shaking now. "You trained them to disappear." William's eyes followed the gesture, and yet she didn't. Hannah felt every gaze swing toward her. Her throat tightened, but she held it. She thought of the man in the lobby, the missing hours, the quiet acceptance everyone expected. Rachel's voice dropped. "You'll lose good people over this." William stood. "We already have." He nodded to security. They moved. Rachel didn't resist. As they escorted her out, she twisted, once looking at Hannah with something close to disbelief. Not anger. Recognition. When the doors closed, the room stayed silent. William exhaled. Effective immediately, he said, "We initiate a full payroll restitution, external review, federal notification, and a restructuring of compliance reporting." A board member cleared his throat, and Ms. Brooks William turned to Hannah again. His expression softened just slightly. "She doesn't go back to night shifts," he said. "She sits where she can see everything." Hannah felt the weight of it settle heavy and irreversible. The meeting adjourned in stunned quiet. As people filed out, she remained seated, heart still racing, knowing the hardest part was no longer proving the truth. It was living with what telling it would change. The hospital didn't celebrate the next morning. It recalibrated. Notices went up without logos or signatures. Meetings were canceled, then rescheduled behind closed doors. A line formed outside human resources before sunrise people, clutching envelopes, voices low, faces drawn. Hannah watched from the glass corridor above the lobby, hands resting on the railing, feeling the building shift under her feet. By noon, payroll deposits began to land. Phones buzzed. Tears broke through practiced restraint. A man in scrubs leaned against a wall and slid down to sit on the floor, laughing and crying at the same time. Hannah turned away before he could see her watching. This wasn't hers to own. It was simply overdue. William Carter asked her to walk with him. No entourage, no assistant, just the 2 of them moving through the executive wing where sunlight fell clean and unfiltered. He spoke without looking at her. "You didn't ask for permission," he said. "No," Hannah replied. "That matters," he said. "People who wait for permission tend to inherit the silence." They stopped at a window overlooking the city. Sirens traced distant lines through the air. "There will be backlash," William continued, "from donors, from vendors, from people who preferred the old quiet," I know, Hannah said. He studied her profile. "Do you—" She met his gaze. "I do now." Later, alone in the temporary office they had given her, Hannah opened her email. There were messages she couldn't read yet. Gratitude, warnings, invitations. One subject line stood out, sent from an external address she didn't recognize. "We should talk, for your own protection." She closed the window and locked the screen. Marcus Doyle appeared at the door, clearing his throat. "Security sweep's done," he said. "You're clear." "For how long?" Hannah asked. Marcus shrugged. "Long enough." As the day bled into evening, Hannah returned to the lobby. The guard desk was calm now. No raised voices. No red denial screens. She stood where she had stood before, half hidden, and felt the difference in the air. People noticed the systems when they worked. They noticed them more when they didn't. Her phone vibrated. A message from William. "Tomorrow, 8 in the morning," spelled out. "We begin building the part that lasts." Hannah slipped the phone away. Outside, the city lights came on one by one, indifferent to victories and losses alike. She felt the weight of what had been set in motion, the long arc that would outlive the meeting that names even her. For the first time, she understood that power didn't announce itself. It accumulated quietly, waiting for someone willing to stand where the system least expected a spine. The subpoena arrived folded, once slid under her door, like an apology that came too late. Hannah read it, standing in her kitchen shoes, still on coat, half unbuttoned the paper, trembling only after she finished. Federal inquiry. Sworn testimony. Date spelled out. Time spelled out. Her name clean and centered, no title beneath it. She sat. The chair creaked. The radiator clicked. Outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop and moved on. Ordinary sounds doing their best to pretend nothing had changed. At the hospital, the mood had shifted again. Not relief now. Vigilance. People spoke carefully, eyes measuring rooms before sentences. The systems worked. The trust did not. Hannah passed through it all like a quiet weather front, not acknowledged, not avoided. Watched. In the break room, she found the older maintenance worker from the courtyard hands wrapped around a paper cup. He nodded once. "They fixed it," he said. "They're fixing it," Hannah replied. He smiled without teeth. "That's more than yesterday." Marcus caught her near the elevators. "You're getting attention you didn't order," he said. "Some of it won't be friendly." "I know." "Good," he said. "Means you're still thinking." That afternoon, William called her in. No speeches, just files on a table. Vendor contracts terminated. Donor calls logged. A memo from legal cautious and dense. He watched her read, not interrupting. "They'll ask why you didn't stop sooner," he said finally. Hannah looked up. "I wasn't allowed to see sooner." "They won't like that answer." "I don't need them to," she said. He nodded. "You'll be asked who helped you." Hannah thought of Thomas, of Marcus, of the people whose names never appeared anywhere official. "I'll answer honestly," she said. "That's dangerous," William said. "So is silence," she replied. That night, Hannah walked home instead of taking the train. The city felt closer at street level, faces visible, windows lit. She passed a diner where a man laughed too loudly, a woman shook her head and smiled anyway. She passed a bank, a church, a closed storefront with papered glass. Systems within systems, all held together by belief. At her building, a note waited on the lobby table unsealed. "Thank you for seeing us." No name, no return address. Just that. Upstairs, Hannah set the subpoena beside the shadow ledger drives and turned off the light. In the dark, she understood the cost wasn't the attention or the risk. It was the permanence. Once you show people where the bones are buried, you don't get to pretend you didn't learn the map. She lay awake, breathing steady, readying herself to speak again, knowing the next room would be larger, brighter, and far less forgiving. The hearing room smelled like paper and old wood, the kind of place built to remember everything. Hannah sat at the long table, hands folded, spine straight, eyes forward. The seal on the wall caught the light dull and heavy. When she spoke, her voice carried without effort, not loud, not careful, precise. She described systems, permissions, timing. She named no heroes. She named no villains. She let the facts do the work they had been waiting to do. By the time it ended, the room felt altered, not absolved, just unable to return to what it had been. Outside, cameras waited, lenses lifted, like questions she did not answer. She walked past them, coat-buttoned breath, steady the noise breaking against her and falling away. Back at the hospital, the changes were quieter. New reporting lines, transparent ledgers, open dashboards anyone could read if they cared to look. People still whispered, but the whispers carried less power now. Hannah moved into a corner office with a view of the street, not the skyline. She wanted to see people arrive and leave. She wanted to remember who systems were for. William stopped by once, standing in the doorway instead of taking a seat. "They'll call this a reform," he said. "They can call it whatever they need," Hannah replied, "as long as it works." He smiled, brief and real. "It will," he said, "because it has to." Weeks later, payroll ran clean. Not perfect, honest. The man from the lobby passed Hannah in the hall, nodded once kept going. That was enough. Marcus waved from security. Thomas sent a short message, still standing. Hannah archived the last of the old files and locked the drawer, not to hide them, but to mark an ending. On her way out one evening, she paused where the glass reflected her back. Same posture, same shoes, different gravity. Power had not changed her shape. It had changed her silence. She stepped into the street as the city gathered itself for nightlights coming on in patient rows. Somewhere another system would be humming, assuming no one was watching. Somewhere another person would be told to keep their head down. Hannah walked on, knowing what she knew now, carrying it without spectacle. If this story moved, you take a second to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments with 3 words only: truth over silence.